What I'm going to present this afternoon is but a small segment of a larger ongoing project of mine, a theoretical and interdisciplinary undertaking which seeks to bring together poetry and poetics, political economy, Marxist theory and feminist theory. This segment itself is my work in progress. In other words, what you are going to hear is not something that is in a state of being, but in a process of becoming. And there are three short movements in my presentation, and the first movement is called Outlining the Contours and Coordinates of My Reading. We must say what reading we are guilty of. And first, a short poem. The war will come, my love. And in combat, there will be no respite, nor a moment for song, but rather poetry being born out of the depth of our blood-drenched struggle. The war will come, my love, the war will come, and I will wrap myself up in your invincible shadow like a ferocious lioness. I will protect my children's land, and no one will detain this victory, fully armed to the future. Now this poem is born out of a specific life and death struggle in the violent spaces of land, labor, language, and the body. I've been arguing for quite some time now that these four sites, again, land, labor, language, and the body continue to constitute the fundamental sites of struggle, the sites of both oppression and opposition for the global oppressed. I've also been arguing that the emancipation of humanity in its entirety, let me repeat, the emancipation of humanity in its entirety, which I submit is the project of both Marxism and what has come to be known as revolutionary feminism, is not possible without the emancipation of those four sides from such historically produced over-determined and over-determining systems of oppression as patriarchy, capitalism, imperialism/colonialism, and racism, and of course other forms and forces of oppression, profoundly interconnected as they all are. That being said, let me return to the poem I just quoted. The poem in question involves the body of a poet and the body of poetry confronting bullets and bayonets. And these bullets and bayonets pierce the land in which the poet herself rewrites and reinscribes her body in the language of revolution. And this reinscription is made possible through the labor of mother's love and the labor that produces value in both axiological and political-economic senses. The poet who writes thus of her struggle as the, I quote, the greatest of love songs, unquote, is none other than Gioconda Belli, a Nicaraguan feminist, socialist, activist, organizer, warrior, a poet in exile, yet a combative poet, organically rooted in her own homeland, Nicaragua. A poet who continues to speak to other third world feminist poets from Puerto Rico to Palestine to the Philippines. A poet who by all implications wants thoughts and theoretical interventions to be rigorously situated in the very web of the acutely specific and concrete historical material circumstances, and inspire such interventions to be thus worldly and also third worldly, and certainly contestatory, combative, confrontational, and coalitional in the service of, I quote, nothing short of a revolution, unquote, to use Belli's own phrase. But what is revolution then? I argue that Belli's own idea of revolution can be captured in the words of another socialist feminist, the Arab feminist, Maryam Zazayeri, in her powerful piece called Revolution, now included in the recent anthology titled Marxism and Feminism. It actually came out a couple of years back. Zazayeri puts it this way, I quote, humanity is grappling with inequality, poverty, political oppression, wars and occupation, global conditions created by capitalism. This condition must not continue. It must end. So we must think how to reverse the course of this situation and what social force can usher in a new chapter in a human history that is radically a different social organization, thus emancipating humanity from the carnage of capitalism. This I call revolution, unquote. In the spirit of both Belli and Zazairi, while drawing upon the Marxist revolutionary Rosa Luxemburg and the French philosopher, Maoist philosopher Alain Badiou, I will put it this way. Revolution aims at a rupture, a total rupture with the existing order of things and the inauguration of an unprecedented mode of production in the interest of human emancipation. Now, to the extent that a nationally and geographically grounded feminist poet speaks confrontationally and coalitionally, and for that matter speaks truth to structures of power relations and production relations as capitalism, as well as imperialism, militarism, and racism, which all, as Belli shows in her poetry, which all are patriarchal, Belli's voice, as she herself suggested in an interview, keeps reverberating through the textual circuits and channels already forged and opened up by revolutionary feminist poets across Latin America and the Third World. Thus, Belli seems to be suggesting that she is very much with the Nicaraguan feminist poet Rosario Murillo, who says, I quote, "We make revolution when we write a poem," unquote. Or with the Chilean feminist poet in exile, Marjorie Agosin, who says, I quote, "Don't conspire with oblivion. Tear down the silence. I want to be the appeared woman from among the labyrinths. Come back, return, name myself, call my name," unquote. Or with the Salvadoran feminist cultural activist Nora Mendez, some of whose poems were produced in the thick of the life and death struggle in the trenches of El Salvador, one who raises her voice thus, I quote, "Ana Maria puts the poetry on to boil while her courage sows the banners. Ana Maria, Ana Maria, Ana Maria at the washing stones early at the riverside. Ana Maria, furious when they would touch her child and when they would bleed her land. Ana Maria put the poetry onto the boil," unquote. Or with the Mexican feminist poet Veronica Volco, who directly confronts the stark materiality of hunger in the very torn spaces of the land and language. I quote, "Hunger is the first eye of the body. Hunger is the first eye of the body, the first eye in the night of the body, the night with which flesh first sees flesh," unquote. Or with the African-American feminist lesbian poet Audre Lorde, who says, I quote, "And our labor has become more important than our silence. Our labor has become more important than our silence." Or, for that matter, with an entire constellation of Chicana feminists in their ongoing anti-patriarchal, anti-racist, anti-capitalist struggles. Lest I get misunderstood, I need to point out that the cataloging narrative I've rather quickly mobilized here does not purport to be just a catalog of poets as such. In fact, in consonance with the very spirit of the kind of coalitional politics, poetics, and praxis that Belli herself underwrites, the kind of politics which, however, is decisively opposed to any abstract commonality, at the expense of a dialectic of difference, and for that matter, at the expense of the historicity and specificity of sites, subjects, scenes, and signs that are all over determined arenas of gender struggles, race struggles, and class struggles. I intend to point to a conflicting and converging constellation of concerns and questions that not only come out directly differentially and even metaphorically, metonymically, and yet materially in the relatively early poetry of Gioconda Belli, but that also continue to remain relevant to the contemporary conditions and configurations of power relations and production relations that traverse quite some areas from the site of global feminist political economy through actually existing feminist struggles in Nicaragua and Latin America, down to the production of cultural hegemony and the resistances on both local and global scales. Connected to such concerns remain a few other and more specific concerns of mine here. I intend to articulate certain coordinates and contours of what might be called a feminist geopoetics by taking necessary cues and clues and drawing insights from Belli herself. By this poetics then, I mean the kind of signifying production that on the one hand remains organically rooted in the specific geographical territory and that on the other dialectically opens up spaces of contacts and conflicts between national struggle and the question of gender. In such a way that any national liberation struggle cannot be conceptualized, let alone mobilized, without simultaneously engaging the questions of women in specific historical and geographical contexts. For Belli, indeed, geography matters like history, while the geographical, or for that matter the territorial, continues to remain not merely an imagined community in the Benedict Andersonian sense of the term, but also, and more significantly, an over-determined material site that can by no means escape the logic of political economy, predicated as it is on unequal power/production relations between capital and labor, between, say, patriarchal capital and women's labor. Belli's work, life, and the history of Nicaragua all need to make sense of one another in the kind of undertaking I have then proposed. Also, the history of Nicaragua brings up the question of engagement with the larger structures, narratives, and practices of capitalism and imperialism, which unfortunately get bypassed by many of what the Egyptian Marxist theorist Masoud Zabarzadeh once called postalists. Postalists or postists, such as postmodernists, postcolonialists, post-Marxists, post-nationalists, post-dialectics, and so on and so forth, and those versions of metropolitan feminisms interested in discursive transactions and with such postisms that only tend to fetishize difference, specificity, and identity at the expense of larger structures and systems and modalities. It's not for nothing that the Native American writer Leslie Marmon Silko, in her epic novel called The Almanac of the Dead, speaks at the top of her character's voice. I quote, "Land first, talk later," unquote. Or when the African-American lesbian feminist warrior mother poet, to use her own term, this is not something that I'm saying, she used that term, called herself lesbian feminist warrior mother poet, Audre Lorde, conveys the message thus. So most people in this world are yellow, black, brown, poor, female, non-Christian, and do not speak English, unquote. Both of them, like Belli herself, precisely call attention to the larger historical material structures and practices whereby unequal power relations and production relations are produced and reproduced in specific, say, small microsites. Within such a matrix of relations then, for Silko and Lorde, as it is certainly for Belli, gender constitutes the vital arena of struggle. However, it needs to be pointed out that what is distinctive, and for that matter, politico-economically significant about their approach to gender, is that they do not merely reckon gender as an analytical category as such, nor do they consider gender as only a matter of individual identity or even group identity within a specific socio-economic space, but that they, Silko, Lorde, and Belli all posits gender relation as essentially a global and local power relation and production relation. I repeat, gender relation as a power relation and production relation and vice versa. All right, so I'm left with 5 minutes, so what I'm going to do here is that I will try to move on to some tentative propositions and spell them out as categorically as possible, and I want to spell them out for further discussions, if possible, given our time, for further discussions. So, some propositions which I have, which I'm advancing on the basis of my reading a whole host of third world feminist poets in particular. So proposition 1, this is the proposition. For Belli, in the final instance, revolutionary feminism, like Marxism, names the project of universal human emancipation with which any form of oppression whatsoever is absolutely irreconcilable. And the universal here is no erasure of the particular, it's the other way around. For the universal accentuates, clarifies, and accounts for the particular. The questions of the land, labor, language, and the body as the fundamental sites of women's struggles against patriarchy, capitalism, imperialism/colonialism, and racism, profoundly interconnected as they are indeed the questions of the deep particularity of women's struggles to which Belli is characteristically attentive. Proposition 2. For Belli, the production of what she herself calls her, I quote, feminist consciousness, unquote, is geographically marked and territorially embedded in ways in which all such categories as nation, nation-state, and nationalism remain crucial, if not adequate, to her feminism. A reading of her famous yet under-engaged poem called Nicaragua, Water, Fire, reveals this point with full force. Belli's geographical consciousness, or for that matter, her acute spatial consciousness, serves as the motor of engineering an anti-colonial, anti-imperial revolution on the one hand, and on the other, transnation itself, nation within quotation marks, nation itself, more than an imagined community. In fact, nation serves as a material site of struggle, where, according to her, revolution and emancipation are impossible without the emancipation of women in Nicaragua. The question she raises is, how can there be any national liberation in Nicaragua or elsewhere without women's emancipation, a particular revolutionary question that emanated from the new Women's Association, which was simultaneously made possible and necessitated by the Nicaraguan Revolution and Reconstruction, that unevenly emphasized the questions of women, remaining patriarchal in many dimensions and directions, certain unprecedented changes in women's lives notwithstanding. Proposition 3. For Belli, neither nationalism nor gender remains a matter of mere individual or group identity. As a number of her poems, from About the Seed through Line of Fire to Thunder and Rainbow, suggest. Even in her early erotic poetry, in which Belli, like Audre Lorde, reinserts her body into the revolutionary body politic that she forges and reforges in her imagination in the specific geographical context of Nicaragua, Belli posits gender as relational to the structure of power, which is patriarchy. And later, Belli even goes to the extent of envisaging and engaging gender relations as local and global production relations, and it is in this context that Belli seems to be opening up possibilities of engaging a distinct feminist political economy. It is probably because of her direct engagement with political economy in the very site of poetic production. Belli deploys phrases such as mode of production and relations of production directly in her poems, in a number of her poems. And she exemplarily avoids what Fanon alerted us to, the pitfalls of national consciousness in fetishizing identity at the expense of relations and structures that produce and reproduce oppressions and exploitations of women. And this is my last proposition, and then I'll stop. Time is up? No? Okay, just 1 minute. Last, As for the questions of poetics and praxis, Belli can certainly be placed in the tradition of poetry as praxis, as constituted by a number of third world feminist poets from Puerto Rico to Palestine to Pakistan to the Philippines, from Brazil to the Bahamas. Belli ardently endorses what an anonymous Salvadoran woman poet had to say. I quote, "Our poetry cannot afford to be in love with the moon when we have bomb craters in our own land dropped by one of the biggest and most powerful nations of the planet." Unquote. For Belli, indeed, poetry does not automatically become a praxis, but poetry becomes a material force, or for that matter, a praxis only when it grips the masses by giving both powerful and beautiful voice to their economic, social, political, and cultural problems. To quote Belli, these are the last lines from Belli with a poem again. I end with a poem. "No alternative but the struggle. Nicaragua, my love, my raped girl, don't take them root. We want maize, rice, beans for the seeds to set in the earth where the peasant keeps in a wooden box his land reform title deed. Nicaragua, Nicaragua, my little love, tell them her story travels in aeroplanes to tell her story all over the world with her story. Come, give me your hand, your young militant's hand. Now we are joined by blood and revolution. Together we shall face our future victory. We shall be born. We shall be born again and again and again, many times, keeping our flag red, daughter, woman, comrade, Miriam." That's all for now. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Azfar, for your very impassioned delivery. Now we will open the floor to questions. I think
for Azfar, just a quick question. I mean, you did mention Pakistan, and I understand why you were cataloging all these women's voices. It's very curious, there really wasn't anybody from South Asia in the poets, that you were concentrating on Latin America and the Middle East, and perhaps those are the backyards of US foreign policy. Why, wait, let me finish. Well, I want to get back to the question of geography and specificity. Is there something about, I can't think of a lot of left-wing poets, female, in South Asia particularly, and I wonder if that's about conditions of politics as much as anything else, and I'm just throwing this out there.
Yeah, your question, first question about South Asia and Pakistan. Of course, my project is about Latin America in general, and Nicaragua in particular. And as you know, no list can be exhaustive. There will always be some exclusions, but I'm also aware of the fact that exclusions themselves are not politically and ideologically innocent. That being said, I should also point out here that this configuration of poets that I'm talking about here, has a specific connection to Pakistan, because Belli, in an interview she gave in the year 1994, I think, talked about some Pakistani poets she read with a great deal of zeal, and she thought she was in solidarity with those feminist poets from Pakistan. So that's why I have mentioned Pakistan. As for the question of geographical specificity, this is very fundamental to Belli's own work, because geographical specificity, at the same time, she doesn't fetishize geographical specificity, because she ranges beyond her own borders and makes connections with other feminist poets in Latin America and outside Latin America, because she believes in what she herself called, again in an interview, very explicitly, feminist, coalitional feminist politics. She thinks that we cannot have a larger revolutionary feminist project without building that kind of coalition. And she's very critical of the kinds of, microsite fetishizing politics or micro-politics. In fact, one can be a little critical of Michel Foucault here. Michel Foucault has made enormous contributions to our understanding of power. She's a great theorist of power, there's no denying that fact. But then we can also be critical of Michel Foucault and critical of solidarity, in solidarity with Foucault's work. Of course, he tends to bypass larger narrative, imperialism and so on and so forth. In fact, that's the kind of critique that Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak herself advanced of Michel Foucault and Deleuze and Guattari in her classic piece, Can the Subaltern Speak, towards the beginning, in fact, she takes Foucault to task and Foucault's critique of representational politics. I mean, they want to impose representations and so on and so forth. So I think Spivak makes a great point when she says that Foucault remains generally inattentive to the questions of imperialism and racism. She accounts for the body which is racialized, no, not really. Accounts for the body which is always already white and European and so on and so forth. And he hardly mentions Franz Fanon when it comes to theorism in the body. So the specificity is important, but at the same time, Belli does not fetishize the specificity. That this is it, so I'm grounded, and that's it. She's ready to range beyond her borders. I'll stop here.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question.